Welcome back to Photography Discourse. I know it's been a while since I've put out a video, and I've been pretty busy, and frankly not a lot has happened. But today I thought I would talk about something that keeps coming up in the circles that discuss Nikon, and that is the Z8 and what the Z8 will be, and specifically with respect to megapixels. There's this notion out there that the Z8 might be a lower megapixel camera, something like in the 30 to 36 megapixel range, and that is not going to happen. And if I'm going to be blunt, it's going to be a high megapixel camera, and I want to say why today. First of all, first point, Nikon has to compete within the market. And there's plateaus in the market, there's levels of cameras in the market, and there's price points. And Sony and Canon have established a $3,800 price point, $3,800, $3,900. We'll call it the 4,000 range of camera. And both of their offerings, the current A7R5 is a 61 megapixel camera, and the upcoming R5 Mark II is now rumored to be a 61 megapixel camera. And that rumor comes from Canon Rumors, and it's a C3 rumor, which means it's akin to fact. So they're so sure of the rumor, they're calling it more or less a fact. And it stands to reason. The last one was 45 megapixels. Their 61 isn't a huge jump. So they also want to compete with the Sony. And so that's why they're doing it. And Nikon will be no different. Nikon has been tit for tat with Canon for decades, and that's not going to change now, number one. So there's another reason that follows with that is that the Z6 III will also be coming out soon. The Z6 III is a very important camera in the Nikon lineup because it's sort of the all-arounder at the $2,500 price point. It may be less. It's going to be somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500. I think the high end is $2,500. Maybe it'll come in at $2,250 or $2,300, something like that. But it's going to be a very good camera, still camera and video camera. I'm sure it will have 6K with all kinds of bells and whistles that go with that. But we also know that it's going to be higher than 24 megapixels. Nikon's on record, they have been for some time, as saying that the Z6 II was the last 24 megapixel camera. So the Z6 III will not be a 24 megapixel camera. The Z6 III will likely be in the somewhere between 30 and 36 megapixels. That being the case, if a Z8 came out at that same like megapixel bracket, it would make absolutely no sense. That would be nonsensical, honestly. So another reason why the Z8 should be a high megapixel camera is Nikon needs to leverage their HE technology. So they have this great HE compression algorithm that has taken their raw files and cut them down significantly with relatively little to no loss in quality, especially with the HE star format. So now that they have the use of this, why would they not be using it? And that's a perfect application for this technology, is in a higher megapixel sensor. So if they come out with a 61 megapixel camera and they can apply the HE star and the HE protocols to it, you're now back down to file sizes that are very reasonable, like akin to the old 30 megapixels and so forth. So this notion of too large a file for the computers to handle is sort of an outdated concept at this point. Additionally, they could and should bring back the large, medium, and small RAW formats. If you combine large, medium, and small format with the HE and the HE star compressions, you have basically the gambit of, you could have a 20 megapixel shot, a 40 megapixel shot, a 60 megapixel shot, all at sizes that are incredibly small. I mean, your 20 megapixel shot would be down in like the 8 megabyte range or something in some cases with certain compressions of maybe HE. So this is an obvious way to leverage the technology, and the camera, a Z8 is a professional camera. It will have Pro UI, which means it will have the mode button and those buttons on top. It will not have that little rotating dial, and it will have the lighted buttons in the back, and it should at least be a little bit more robust of a camera in the hand. Even though it won't have a built-in grip, I would think that it would be at least slightly larger than a Z6 or a Z7 currently is. And it's for professional photographers that would be doing commercial work, studio work. And those kinds of photography require megapixels. That's something that, for product photography, more megapixels is better because light is not an issue. You have light. You want as much megapixels as you can get without running into problems of diffraction and things like that. But we already know 61 megapixels, something like 61 is definitely not too many megapixels from a diffraction standpoint, because there's cameras that are already doing that and it's successful. Will it affect where diffraction creeps in at what f-stop? Yeah, to some extent it will, but I suspect 61 isn't the breaking point. It's probably closer to like 80 or more. We already know there's a Fuji film camera out that just came out. I think it's the XH2, I can't remember. It has 40 megapixels. Now that's an APS-C sensor, so if you extrapolate that density of pixel to a full frame, you're talking about something like 90 megapixels. So it's totally doable from a diffraction standpoint. That's also a kind of a false red herring argument, in my opinion. I think the video specs for the Z8 will be something akin to what's rumored for the R5 Mark II. So it'll have 8K of all sorts. My guess is it will be inferior to the Z9 as a video camera, and it should be, but it will be close, very close. Close enough that anyone who's using for hybrid purposes, it's totally satisfactory. The Z9's way, way beyond what any hybrid shooter really needs right now. So those things kind of don't matter. I also think we can learn from the R5 II rumor, Canon R5 II rumor, as to when it's going to release, which is they state in Q2 next year. That tells me that the Z8 is probably also a Q2 camera, because these cameras have to come out relatively at the same time. Canon or Nikon has to show they're competing with Canon and that they're on par with Canon's offerings. And if anything, I think they'd be wise to release it like 2 or 3 weeks after the R5 II. And assuming that it has equal and or better specifications, which I do believe it will. I think Nikon knows exactly what they're doing. They've known about the R5 II coming out. They know what the specs are going to be. These companies talk a lot more than people think, and they have much stronger sense of what each other are doing than the average consumer tends to believe. So I think the Z8 would come out around the time of the R5 II, preferably slightly after, and just kind of wow everybody. If not, it can come out slightly before, a couple weeks beforehand, and kind of wow everybody, in which case it would make the R5 II underwhelming. But we'll see. We'll see about that. So finally, I want to say, if you're someone who wants a Z8, likes the idea of a Z8, likes this notion of a baby Z9, people call it a baby Z9. First, the Z8's not going to be a baby Z9. That's not how Nikon operates. It's not how they've operated in the past. The D850 was not a baby D5. The D500 was a baby D5. That's something else. There may well be a Z90 or something that's a baby a Z9 in the sense that it's a very high-speed machine for APS-C and very robust for sports action wildlife. Z8 is a D850 child, if you will, like the lineage of D850. And for those that like the idea of having that camera, but they say they want it in a 30 megapixel sort of environment, to them I just would simply say you should buy a Z6 III. That's going to be an awesome camera, and it's going to be 31, 32, 33, 35, 36 megapixels. It's going to be in there. It's probably going to be the same as whatever the A7 IV is. I think it's 33 megapixels. But I could see them going as high as 36. That's the camera for you. If you want that, you should not buy a Z8. Z8's not for you. It's not for you. Not for your use case. It could be, because the proposed Z8 that I'm suggesting would have a capacity to shoot a medium RAW file, which would be something in the 40 megapixel or low 40 megapixels, and that could solve your use case if you wanted to shoot that way. But if you really don't need the higher megapixel and you don't need that extra capacity, you just buy a Z6 III and you're going to be perfect. That camera's going to slay it, and it's going to be right in the range you want. So you shouldn't lament Nikon doing what they need to do for the proper market, to make proper market moves, because the proper market move for the Z8 is to have more megapixels and more options, more professional shooting options. That's what the Z8 is for. Z6 III is an all-arounder and a crushing one, and if it's going to have between 30 and 36 megapixels, there's not much you can't do with that if you're most any kind of shooter, with the exception of maybe studio. You can even shoot studio and commercial stuff with those megapixels. People did it for a long time. People had less megapixels than that when they shot it, but that's the genre that would look to having more megapixels. and not regular street photography or even regular portraiture or regular just about anything else. Landscape, maybe. And Z8 would be would be a great landscape camera, and landscapers would love the extra megapixels. Anyway, I've kind of gone on and on a little bit too much about it, but bottom line, I think Nikon's got a big year ahead of them. Next year should be awesome. We should see a Z6 III, we should see a Z8, we should see some really great prime lenses, 35-1.2, 85-1.2. I'm pretty sure we're going to see the 200 to 600 everybody wants, and if we're lucky, maybe we'll also see a Z90 or some other APS-C camera that's superior to the Z5 or a Z5 Mark II. Anyway, with that, I want to thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.